I didn't expect anything unusual that evening. I thought it would be another routine checkup, another reminder of how fragile my heart had become. But then, the doctor pressed a folded piece of paper into my palm. His fingers lingered for just a second too long, his eyes searching mine. I frowned. "What's this?" He leaned in, whispering so low I could barely hear him. "Read it later, and listen to me. Whatever you do, pretend everything is normal. But do not go home with your son tonight." My mouth went dry. I blinked at him, confused. "What, my son? Daniel?" The doctor didn't answer. His eyes flicked toward the door, where I could hear Daniel's muffled voice. "Mom, you almost done in there?" The doctor straightened quickly, his tone brisk and professional again. "I'll finish up your discharge papers." "Take care, Mrs. Collins." And just like that, he slipped out of the office. My fingers trembled as I unfolded the note. The words were hastily scrawled in blue ink, almost jagged. "Don't trust your son tonight." The air left my lungs. I whispered to myself, my voice shaking. "My Daniel? My only son? Why would he write this?" For a moment I just stared at the paper, my heart thudding painfully against my chest. The boy I raised alone, the boy I sacrificed everything for. Why would my doctor, warn me against him? And why tonight? The door creaked open. Daniel stepped inside with his usual easy smile. He looked so normal, hands in his jacket pockets, hair a little messy from the wind. He grinned. "Ready to go home, Mom? I'll bring the car around." I shoved the note under my sweater sleeve so fast the paper scratched my wrist. My lips curled into a smile I didn't feel. "Yes, sweetheart, just give me a second." He tilted his head, squinting at me. "You okay? You look pale." "I'm fine." My voice cracked, so I cleared my throat and forced a lighter tone. "Just tired." He nodded slowly, then stepped closer and touched my arm. "Come on, Mom, you've been cooped up in this place too long. Let's get you home." His voice was warm, familiar. But now, those words twisted in my head. Home, with him. The doctor's whisper echoed inside me. "Do not go home with your son tonight." I swallowed hard, my hands tightening around my purse strap. My smile stayed fixed, but my mind was spiraling. Why would Daniel hurt me? Has he done something I don't know? What if this is all a mistake? But what if it isn't? Mom? Daniel's eyes narrowed. "You sure you're all right?" I forced a laugh, shaky and thin. Yes. Just gathering my things." He shrugged, moving back toward the door. "All right, I'll wait outside. Don't keep me long. It's freezing out there." The door closed behind him with a soft click. I sat frozen in that chair, the note burning against my skin under my sleeve. I didn't know what scared me more, the possibility that the doctor was wrong, or the possibility that he was right. One thing I did know, as I forced myself to stand, my knees weak and trembling, I had to hide my fear. I had to smile. I had to pretend nothing was wrong, but deep inside, I knew something was terribly, terribly wrong, and whatever was waiting for me tonight. It had already begun. People often ask me why I didn't see it sooner, why I didn't notice the signs. And every time I give the same answer, because I didn't want to. See, before everything shattered, my life looked ordinary. To the outside world, I was Margaret Collins, a 72-year-old retired schoolteacher, widowed for almost 3 decades. People in the neighborhood knew me as kind, dependable, the woman who always had time to wave at the kids or offer cookies at Christmas. But inside, my whole world revolved around one person, Daniel, my son, my only son, 38 years old. To everyone else, he was a model caretaker, devoted, responsible, always by my side. He managed my finances, handled my appointments, and checked in almost every day. "He's all I have left," I used to say with a smile whenever someone asked about him. I trust him with everything, and that was the truth. At least that's what I believed. It all started when I lost Robert, my husband. I was 43, standing at his grave with Daniel clinging to my hand. He was only 9 then. I remember his little fingers squeezing mine so tightly, as though if he let go, the whole world would swallow him. "Mom," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Where did Dad go?" I knelt, pulled him into my arms, and through my tears I whispered back, "He's with God now, sweetheart. But I'm here. I'll always be here." And from that day forward, it was just us. I worked long hours at school, grading papers at the kitchen table while Daniel scribbled his homework beside me. Sometimes I'd nod off and he'd nudge me awake, grinning. "Mom, you're drooling on the math book." I'd laugh, embarrassed, then chase him around the kitchen until we were both breathless with giggles. Those moments, those small, silly moments, were what kept me alive. I gave up vacations, new clothes, even a social life. Everything went into raising him, and for years, it seemed worth it. By the time Daniel was a man, people admired him. "He's such a devoted son," Mrs. Grady, my neighbor, would say. Watching him mow my lawn on Saturday mornings, Daniel would wink at her. "Gotta keep Mom's castle standing, right?" She'd beam at me. "You raised him right, Margaret." And I'd nod, pride swelling in my chest because I believed it. I truly did. Daniel drove me everywhere, doctor's visits, the grocery store, even to church. He handled the bills, the banking, the phone calls. "Don't worry, Mom," he'd say whenever I fretted. "I've got it covered. You just rest." He'd show up with takeout some nights, plop down beside me on the couch and say, "Movie night?" Like he was still a teenager. We'd eat popcorn, laugh at old comedies, and for those moments, I felt safe, loved. But there were cracks, small ones I ignored, like the time I asked for a copy of my bank statements. He sighed, loud and sharp. "Mom, why do you need those? Don't you trust me?" I laughed nervously. "Of course I do, sweetheart. I just like to know what's going on." He stared at me for a long moment, his jaw tight. "Well, maybe you should let me handle things since you get confused sometimes." That word, confused, hit me like a slap. But I brushed it off, told myself he was just stressed. Another time, I suggested taking the bus to my doctor's appointment. "No," he snapped, his eyes narrowing. "Are you kidding? You want people thinking I don't take care of my own mother? Forget it, I'm driving you." His voice was sharp, almost angry. But then he softened, added quickly, "I don't mind, really. You're my responsibility." And I smiled, convinced again that he was just being protective. Even small things felt off when I replay them now, like the attic. I once mentioned selling the old furniture up there, pieces that hadn't been touched in decades. His reply was instant, firm. "No, leave it. I'll deal with it when the time's right," and that was that. I never asked again. Friends would invite me out sometimes. Tea, bingo, church events. But when I mentioned it, Daniel frowned. "Mom, you don't need to tire yourself. Just stay home. I'll come by instead." Or when I knitted scarves or baked cookies to give to neighbors, he'd shake his head. "Don't waste your energy on people who don't matter. Save it for me." At the time, I thought it was endearing, that he wanted me to himself. My devoted son, who cared more than anyone else ever could. Now I see it differently. Now I wonder if it was the first rope in the web he was spinning around me. One afternoon, I remember calling him. "Daniel, I can't find the checkbook." "Did you move it?" There was a long silence on the line. Then his voice, cold. "Mom, stop worrying about the checkbook. I told you, I handle the bills." "I know, Then why are you asking? Don't you trust me?" The silence stretched. My throat tightened. Finally, I whispered, "Of course I do." His sigh was heavy, irritated. Then softer, "Good, because I'm all you've got, and I'll always take care of you. Remember that." I forced a smile, even though he couldn't see it. "I know, sweetheart." "I know." But something about those words left a chill in my chest. Still, I clung to the picture I wanted to see. The devoted son. The boy who never abandoned me. I told neighbors proudly, "Oh, Daniel takes such good care of me. I don't know what I'd do without him." And I meant it, because by then, he wasn't just my son. He was my world, my anchor. I trusted him with my money, my health, my safety, my very life. But now looking back, all the warning signs were there, the impatience, the controlling decisions, the dismissive tone, the way he chipped at my independence, little by little, until I had none left. I see it all so clearly now. But at the time, I refused to see it. The first time I heard it, I told myself I must have misunderstood. I had just finished my tests at the hospital. They left me sitting in that cold room with the buzzing lights while Daniel stepped out into the hallway to make a call. I could hear his voice through the thin wall. At first it was low, calm, but then his tone shifted, sharp, demanding. I said I need those test results now. "And keep it between us, all right? She doesn't need to know everything. I froze. The words echoed in my ears like a siren. She doesn't need to know everything. My chest tightened. Who was he talking about, me? I pressed my hand against the wall, straining to hear more. His voice grew colder, almost unrecognizable. No, don't argue with me. Just do what I asked. I'll handle her. Handle me. My breath hitched, and I pulled back, shaking. That wasn't my Daniel's voice. At least, not the one I thought I knew. A moment later, the door swung open and he stepped back in, his smile wide, cheerful. Ready to go, Mom? Let's get you home. I nodded numbly, pretending nothing was wrong. But inside, a seed of doubt had been planted. That night, when Daniel left me alone in the living room, I did something I hadn't done in years. I pulled out my old laptop, dusted from disuse, and tried to log into my bank account. My hands shook as I typed the password. It took me 3 tries before I got it right. And then, my stomach dropped. Several large withdrawals. Thousands of dollars. Gone. My throat went dry. I clicked through the records, my heart racing faster with each entry. Clothing stores I'd never shopped at, electronics, cash withdrawals from ATMs miles away. Daniel, I whispered, my voice trembling. What did you do? The sound of the front door opening made me slam the laptop shut. Mom? His voice carried from the hallway. Still awake? I forced myself to smile when he walked in. Just reading. He grinned, setting a bag of groceries on the counter. Picked up your favorite. Fresh peaches. I swallowed hard, then gathered my courage. Daniel, can I ask you something? Sure. He was casual, too casual as he washed his hands at the sink. I checked the bank account. My voice quivered. There were some withdrawals I didn't recognize. Thousands. His shoulders stiffened. Just for a second. Then he turned, smiling again. Mom, don't worry about it. I've got it under control. But really, Mom? His voice sharpened. I said, don't worry. You don't need to stress about things like that. That's why I handle it. I felt myself shrinking under his gaze. My hands fidgeted in my lap. It's a lot of money, Daniel. His eyes narrowed. Do you trust me or not? The words cut deep, slicing through my doubt with guilt. Of course I trusted him. He was my son, I forced a smile. Of course I do. And just like that, the conversation ended. But that night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling, my heart pounding. The numbers from the bank screen burned into my mind. Days later, another crack appeared. A nurse at the hospital leaned close to me after a routine check. Her voice was low, cautious. Mrs. Collins, just be careful, all right? Someone's been asking too many questions about your medical records. I frowned. What do you mean? She glanced toward the door, then back at me. A man, your son, I think. He's been insistent, pushing for information he doesn't need. I can't say more, but just be careful. Be careful. The words sank into me like a stone. When Daniel returned to the room minutes later, carrying my coat, he smiled. Ready to go, Mom? That smile, the same one I had cherished for 38 years, suddenly looked different. I stared at him, forcing my lips to curve upward. But inside, a pit had opened in my stomach, heavy and cold. The one person I trusted most. Was he using me? I studied his face as he helped me into my coat, his grin steady, his voice light. But in that moment, all I could think was, what if that smile is nothing but a mask? It started with small things, little cracks that I refused to acknowledge. At first, I told myself it was forgetfulness, age catching up with me. But the truth deep down was far more painful. I began noticing missing medications. Pills I took every morning, vitamins, painkillers, prescriptions, simply gone. Daniel would explain away each time. I must have moved them, Mom. Don't worry about it. His tone was calm, reassuring. But every time his eyes avoided mine. One afternoon, I found myself staring at the empty bottle of my heart medication. My fingers shook as I looked around the kitchen. No Daniel in sight, no explanation. My chest felt tight, like something inside me was warning me. That night, over dinner, Daniel leaned back in his chair, smiling casually. You know, Mom, I've been thinking we should update your will. Just routine stuff. Update my will? I blinked. Why now? Just to make sure everything is in order, for your peace of mind. He smiled again, the same one that hid something I was beginning to suspect. I'll draw it up. Nothing to worry about, I nodded, unsure. His casual tone was unnerving. Later that week, Daniel brought over papers. Here, just some routine documents. Sign here, here, and here. It'll only take a minute. I stared at the pages, hesitation gnawing at me. What are these exactly? Routine. You've signed stuff like this before, Mom. His voice was patient, but there was an edge to it now. Just trust me, I felt a chill. There was something about his insistence that unsettled me. That night, I sat alone in my dimly lit kitchen, the stack of documents in front of me. My hands trembled. I pressed them against my face, closing my eyes. Tears fell quietly. I whispered to the empty room, I don't know what's real anymore. I don't know if I can trust him. I thought of Daniel, of his warm smile, his hand on my shoulder. But then the coldness I overheard at the hospital resurfaced. The withdrawals from my bank account, the nurse's warning, my missing medication. It all collided in my mind. I was a mother who wanted to believe, but I was also a woman who could no longer ignore the truth. The next morning, I found myself walking to Mrs. Ellis's house. She had been my neighbor for decades. A gentle woman with kind eyes and a sharp memory. I knocked softly, she answered, her face lighting up. Margaret! How lovely to see you, I hesitated. Mrs. Ellis, can we talk? Privately? Her expression shifted. Of course. Come in. We sat in her cozy living room. The scent of chamomile tea filled the air. I took a deep breath. Mrs. Ellis, have you noticed anything strange with Daniel? Her face tightened. She nodded slowly. Margaret, I've seen him, at odd hours, sneaking around, sometimes near your bedroom, once near the back door late at night. My heart sank. I gripped my hands together. You've seen this before? I asked softly. Yes, but I didn't say anything. I didn't want to cause trouble. You're so trusting of him, her words stung. Because they were true. I had trusted Daniel completely. I had handed him everything, my life, my independence, my peace of mind, and now I felt the truth pressing in on me. I could no longer ignore it. That afternoon, Daniel came to collect me for dinner. Mom, ready? He asked, voice light. I shook my head. Actually, I'm not feeling up to it tonight. His smile faltered for a moment. Really? We had plans. I know, I said softly, but I think I need some time. His voice hardened slightly. Margaret, don't do this. We need to stick to our routine. Come on. No, Daniel. I'm staying home. He stared at me for a long moment, then nodded curtly. Fine, but you'll change your mind. I watched him leave, his footsteps echoing down the hall. The sound lingered, like the closing of a door I couldn't reopen. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a candle flickering beside me. My hands clutched a cup of tea I couldn't drink. My mind raced with questions. How long had this been happening? How much had he taken? How deep did his betrayal go? I thought of my life before Daniel, of the years I'd spent raising him alone after his father died. The sacrifices, the sleepless nights, the endless work to give him everything. I had given him my love without question. But now I wondered if that love had been his leverage all along. Tears rolled down my cheeks. I pressed my fingers against my temples. I have to be careful, I whispered to myself. Even a mother's love can blind her, and mine almost blinded me to danger. The decision came quietly, like a whisper I couldn't ignore. I would not go home with Daniel tonight, not without knowing the truth. I began to make a plan. A quiet one. I wouldn't let him know. Not yet. The next day my phone rang. It was Daniel. His voice was sharp, almost furious. Where are you? You were supposed to come home with me. I froze, gripping the phone tightly. My heart thudded in my chest. I'm not coming tonight, I said softly, keeping my voice steady despite the storm inside me. There was a pause. Then his voice turned low, dangerous. Margaret, don't test me. You know I don't like being ignored. I swallowed hard. My hands shook. I just need some time. Time? He scoffed. You're mine, Mom. Don't forget that. The line went dead. I sat in silence, my breath trembling. The candle flickered beside me, casting long shadows across the kitchen. Outside, the wind howled like a warning, and I knew something had changed. Could no longer pretend. The cracks were growing too wide to ignore. The moment I decided not to go home with Daniel that night was the moment I crossed a line I could never undo. It wasn't just suspicion anymore, it was certainty. The warmth of his smile was gone. The gentle sun I once knew was replaced by something colder, sharper. The next morning, the first sign appeared, an official-looking envelope slipped under my door. I picked it up, the paper cold between my fingers. The words made my stomach drop. It wasn't the envelope itself, but what it represented. Something calculated, something designed to strip me of control. Inside was a document I barely understood at first glance. My name, Daniel's name, the phrase legal guardianship. My heart pounding, I read, Daniel Carter requests guardianship over Margaret Carter, citing concerns of diminished capacity and safety. My breath caught. I sat on the edge of my bed, trembling. Why? I whispered to myself. Why would he do this? That evening, Daniel walked in as if nothing had happened. Mom, he said warmly, I thought we'd have dinner together. I looked at him, really looked, and my chest felt heavy. Daniel, we need to talk. Not tonight, he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Let's just eat. Dinner was tense. His voice was calm, measured, but there was an undertone I couldn't ignore. Later, at a family gathering, I realized the depth of what he was doing. We were at Aunt Clara's birthday. The room was warm with laughter, plates of food clinking in the background, but Daniel was working a different stage entirely. You know, Mom forgets things all the time, he said loudly to relatives nearby. Yesterday, she locked herself out of the house, completely forgot where her keys were. I felt the blood drain from my face. Daniel, I began. Relax, Mom, he said, leaning closer to me with a mock smile. I'm just telling everyone. They care. I could feel the eyes of my relatives on me. Whispers curled around me like smoke. Some looked concerned, others skeptical. But all I could hear was Daniel's voice twisting the truth. Over the next weeks, his behavior became worse. At gatherings, he would correct me publicly. At one family lunch, I mispronounced a word. You mean restaurant, Mom? Daniel said sharply in front of everyone. I flushed red. Daniel, I murmured. I'm just helping, he said, voice dripping with fake sweetness. But his eyes were calculating. Another time, he took my cane from me in front of friends, claiming, you shouldn't walk without proper support. His grip was firm, dismissive. Every humiliation was a reminder. He was dismantling me piece by piece. It wasn't only public displays. Behind closed doors, the pressure mounted. Daniel would tell my relatives privately, Mom's memory is slipping. I'm the only one who cares enough to handle things. I heard this later from Aunt Clara. Her eyes looked sad when she told me. I didn't want to believe it, Margaret, she said softly. But Daniel keeps saying it. People are starting to believe him. I wanted to scream, to tell her the truth, but my voice felt caught in my throat. Daniel had built a web of influence around me. Slowly, quietly, he was isolating me. One evening, I confronted him. Daniel, what is this about? The guardianship, the lies? His expression hardened. Mom, it's for your own good. You don't understand. You need protection. I don't need protection. I need honesty. He leaned forward, his voice low. You don't know what's best for you anymore. That phrase haunted me. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling. His words echoed, but not for the reason he intended. I wasn't doubting my sanity. I was doubting the person I had trusted most. Isolation crept in. I noticed friends visiting less. Invitations dwindled. Relatives seemed to hesitate before calling. Daniel subtly inserted himself between me and the world. He controlled the flow of information. One afternoon, I went to Mrs. Ellis's house. Her expression was grave when I arrived. Margaret, I've been worried. You've seemed smaller lately, less yourself. I know, I admitted. I can't explain it. Daniel, he's changing everything. She took my hands in hers. You need to be careful. He's taking control. I've seen it before. It starts small, then there's no way back. Her words hit me harder than any confrontation with Daniel had. Because they weren't speculation. They were a warning. Then, the pattern became unmistakable. Every time I resisted him, Daniel escalated. Every small act of defiance was met with sharper retaliation. I stopped going to certain family dinners. He berated me over phone calls. My friends whispered about my condition. Even my own sense of reality began to fray. One afternoon, I found myself alone, sitting in my living room, staring at the framed photo of Daniel and me. He looked radiant. That smile. But now I could see through it. I whispered to myself. He wasn't just trying to take my money. He wanted my freedom, my life. And I knew the next stage would be worse. It came sooner than I imagined. One rainy morning, the postman handed me a thick envelope. My fingers shook as I opened it. Inside was a summons, a court date. The words leapt off the page. Daniel Carter has filed for guardianship over Margaret Carter. The air seemed to vanish from the room. I clutched the paper, my hands trembling so hard I nearly dropped it. Court, guardianship, Daniel's name. It all felt surreal. I could still hear Mrs. Ellis's words in my mind. There's no way back. This wasn't just about control anymore. It was about erasing me entirely. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the summons as the rain outside tapped against the window. Each drop was a hammer blow in my chest, and in that moment, I knew there was no more hiding. I had to fight. But I had no idea what Daniel was truly capable of. When the court summons arrived, I felt the floor beneath me shift. Daniel wasn't just trying to control me anymore. He was trying to erase me completely. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with the summons in my hands. The rain outside tapped against the glass like impatient fingers. My chest felt heavy with fear and anger. I couldn't let him win. I told myself, if I am to survive this, I need allies. The next morning, I called Dr. Samuel Green, my physician for over a decade. Margaret? His voice was calm, concerned. Yes, doctor. I need your help. It's Daniel. He's trying to take everything from me. There was silence on the other end. Then, come in tomorrow. Bring everything you have. At his office, Dr. Green didn't hesitate. He listened, his eyes narrowing. This isn't about safety, he said quietly. This is manipulation. I'll stand by you. His words were a lifeline. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. The following day, I found myself at Mrs. Ellis's porch. Her face was lined with years, but her eyes were sharp. She listened without interrupting as I poured out the whole story. When I finished, she said, Margaret, I've known you most of my life. You've taught more than just math to your students. You've taught strength. Don't let him take that away from you. I squeezed her hand. But how do I fight someone who's pretending to love me? By showing him he can't silence you, she said firmly. Her words stayed with me. The real breakthrough came when I ran into Jonathan Reed, one of my former students. We'd reconnected briefly a year ago at a school reunion, and he had since become a lawyer. I called him in desperation. Jonathan, I need your help. It's Daniel. He's filed for guardianship over me. He's lying, manipulating people. I think he's dangerous. There was a pause. Then he said, Margaret, I remember your lessons on integrity. You taught us to stand up for what's right. I'll help you. I felt a wave of relief. Thank you. No, he said. You're going to fight. I'm just here to make sure you can. That night, I began gathering evidence. I moved quietly through my house. Every file I could find, financial statements, bank records, medication logs, I copied and secured. I started recording conversations with Daniel on my phone, careful to catch every hint of threat or coercion. It was exhausting work, but every document, every recording was a brick in my defense. I remember sitting at my desk one night, staring at a pile of papers and feeling something I hadn't felt in years, power. For the first time in years, I whispered to myself, I stopped seeing myself as a helpless old woman. I was a teacher again, disciplined, sharp, and unwilling to be silenced. That phrase became my mantra. A week later, I sat in Jonathan's office. "This," he said, gesturing to the pile of evidence, "is enough to challenge him. But we have to be careful. He will try to discredit you." "I know," I replied. "But I'm ready." Jonathan leaned forward. "Margaret, we're going to court." A chill ran down my spine, but it was mixed with determination. The first time I told Mrs. Ellis about Jonathan's involvement, she held my hands tight. "You've begun the fight, Margaret. Remember, every battle begins with a single step." I nodded, "And I'm ready to walk it." That night I wrote a note to myself. Strength isn't the absence of fear, it's moving forward in spite of it. Days later, Daniel began to sense something had shifted. His tone changed. He was no longer pretending. At dinner, he said sharply, "You've been seeing someone." I froze. I have a lawyer," I admitted quietly. His eyes flashed with anger. "You're making a mistake you'll regret, Mom." The words hit me like a slap, but this time I didn't shrink. I met his gaze and said firmly, "I'm done being afraid." That night, I sat alone in my living room, the sound of the wind rattling the window. I thought of Daniel's words. They weren't just a threat, they were a promise. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I thought of Mrs. Ellis, of Jonathan, of Dr. Green. I thought of every student I'd ever taught, and I thought of myself, someone who had endured, who had given everything for others, and who would now fight for herself. This wasn't just about a guardianship hearing anymore. It was about reclaiming my life. I whispered to myself, "This is my story, my truth, and I will be heard." That night, as I lay in bed, I made my decision. I wouldn't let Daniel's mask of charm fool anyone again. I would stand, I would speak, and I would fight. But I also knew this was far from over. The morning of the hearing, I woke before dawn. My hands were trembling, not from fear, but from a strange mixture of adrenaline and certainty. The air outside was sharp and wet with autumn drizzle. The world felt heavy, as if it knew this day would change everything. Jonathan arrived at my door with a folder thick with evidence. His face was unreadable, but his presence was steady, reassuring. "Ready?" he asked quietly. I nodded. "I've been ready for this for months." We stepped into the courthouse together, the echo of our footsteps swallowed by the vast, cold marble hall. The courtroom was filled with murmurs, hushed glances. I spotted Mrs. Ellis near the back, her eyes fixed on me like a silent cheer. Somewhere in the crowd sat a few of my former students. Their faces reflected concern, curiosity, and perhaps the faintest hope. The judge called the court to order, her gavel striking with sharp authority. Daniel's voice was the first to break the silence. He stood, shaky but composed, his eyes glistening with tears. "Your Honor," he began, voice wavering, my dear mother, is confused. She's paranoid. She doesn't see that I'm trying to protect her. I only want what's best for her." He looked toward me as if I were a child in need of rescue. I swallowed hard. My heart broke. Not for me, but for the fact that someone I had trusted was painting me as incapable in front of strangers. I sat in silence as my lawyer, Jonathan, began. His voice was firm, precise, unwavering. "Your Honor, we will show that this guardianship petition is built on manipulation, false claims, and financial exploitation. The petitioner, Mr. Daniel Harris, has misrepresented his mother's capacity in order to gain control over her life and her assets." He slid the first document across the table. Bank statements. These show repeated withdrawals from Mrs. Harris's accounts, withdrawals that have no explanation other than Mr. Harris's personal gain. Daniel's jaw tightened. His eyes darted to mine, and I could see the flicker of anger. Jonathan continued. "Exhibit B, medical records and prescription logs that clearly show missing medications. Mr. Harris pressured Mrs. Harris to alter her treatment, which could have serious consequences for her health. We have expert testimony that such interference is both unethical and dangerous, the courtroom murmured. I glanced at Mrs. Ellis. She held my hand under the bench. Jonathan's voice dropped lower. Exhibit C, audio recordings. Mrs. Harris has recorded conversations where Mr. Harris threatens her, explicitly stating that if she does not comply with his wishes, he will remove her rights entirely. A few people gasped softly. Daniel's face hardened, but his voice remained smooth. Your Honor, these are taken out of context. My mother misunderstands. Jonathan cut him off. The recordings speak for themselves. When the final piece of evidence was presented, a signed note from Dr. Samuel Green confirming Mrs. Harris's sound mental capacity. There was a collective intake of breath in the courtroom. Daniel's mask slipped. His voice rose, trembling with frustration. This is not true, he snapped. She doesn't understand what's going on. I'm trying to protect her. My throat tightened. For years, I had silenced my own voice to keep peace. Now that silence had to end. I stood. My knees shook. My hands gripped the edge of the table, and I felt every eye in the courtroom on me. I heard Jonathan's breath catch. You wanted to bury me alive before my time, I said, my voice breaking but firm. You wanted to silence me so you could take my life, my home, my dignity, my freedom. But I'm still here, and I won't be silenced. A hush fell over the courtroom. Daniel's face was red, veins visible at his temples. He opened his mouth, but I kept speaking, my voice gaining strength. I am not confused. I am not weak. I know what's happening, and I see it clearly. This is not protection, it is control, and I will not let you take my life away from me. The courtroom seemed to hold its breath. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I turned to look at the judge, her eyes fixed on me, weighing my words. Jonathan's hand squeezed mine under the table. This is your moment, he whispered. I nodded. I could see Mrs. Ellis nodding from the back row. And I thought of every lesson I had taught my students, about courage, about speaking truth, about fighting for what's right. I was doing exactly that. Daniel tried to speak again, but his voice cracked. His composure was gone. The carefully crafted image of the loving son had fallen away. What was left was anger, raw and exposed. This isn't about money, he shouted. It's about her safety. My voice rose, filled with a mix of grief and defiance. No, Daniel. It was always about control. You wanted to erase me, and you almost did. But I am still here. And so is the truth. The judge leaned forward. Order in the court. Her voice was firm, but not unkind. I sat down, my chest heaving. I felt a strange calm wash over me. This was the moment I had been building toward. Jonathan addressed the court one last time. The evidence shows clear and deliberate attempts to misrepresent Mrs. Harris's condition, to control her finances, and to strip her of her independence. Guardianship should be denied. Mrs. Harris is capable of making her own decisions, and she must be allowed to live without coercion. A murmur of agreement passed through the courtroom. Daniel sat, silent, his hands clenched in his lap. The judge nodded slowly, making notes. I will review the evidence thoroughly before making my decision. As the gavel fell, the weight of what I had just done hit me. I had faced him, my son, and spoken my truth in front of the world. Outside the courthouse, Mrs. Ellis was waiting. She took my hand and whispered, "You did it. You found your voice again." Jonathan approached. "You were incredible. This will change things." I smiled faintly, though my voice cracked. I just needed to stop being afraid. As I walked away from the courtroom that day, I knew the fight was not yet over. But for the first time, I knew I was no longer alone. I had my truth. I had my voice. And that was enough. That night, I sat by my window, looking out at the city lights. Daniel's words still echoed in my mind, but now they had lost their power. I whispered to myself, "You can try to take everything from me, Daniel. But you can never take who I am." When the judge's final words came, the whole courtroom seemed to exhale. "Guardianship denied," she said. Her voice was calm but firm. "Mrs. Harris retains full control of her affairs." My breath caught. For a moment, I felt like the air itself had been pulled from the room. I clutched my purse like a lifeline, my knees trembling as the words sank in. Jonathan, my lawyer, leaned toward me. "We did it," I nodded, my lips too heavy with emotion to speak. Around us, whispers of surprise and relief filled the air. Mrs. Ellis stood, tears streaming silently down her face, and hugged me without a word. Outside the courthouse, the autumn air was sharper, almost cleansing. I could feel my shoulders drop, an exhaustion mixed with triumph. Daniel stood off to the side, flanked by a guard. His face was pale, his eyes fixed on me. I saw rage, shame, desperation, all tangled together. "You'll regret this," he spat quietly. "You have no idea what you've done." I looked at him for the first time without fear. "No, Daniel," I said softly. "You have no idea what you've lost." The weeks that followed felt like waking from a long nightmare. News spread quickly. Daniel was facing charges of fraud, elder abuse, and attempted coercion. My attorney told me the evidence was enough that prosecutors were building a strong case. One evening, Jonathan called. "They've filed charges. Daniel will be arraigned next month." I didn't feel victory, not entirely. I felt the heavy weight of grief for what had been lost. For years I thought family meant blood. But now I knew differently. I began to rebuild my life quietly. My independence felt fragile at first, but each day it grew stronger. I began walking to the park again, talking to Mrs. Ellis over tea, reconnecting with my former students. They became my lifeline, my reminder that love is not just what is given at birth, but what is earned. One afternoon, over tea in her cozy kitchen, Mrs. Ellis said, "You're brave, Margaret. You faced your own son and you stood your ground. That's something most people can't do." I stirred my tea slowly. I just stopped being afraid. For the first time in years, I stopped seeing myself as a helpless old woman. I was a teacher again, disciplined, sharp, and unwilling to be silenced. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "And you've taught the rest of us something as well." The day Daniel was taken to jail, I watched from my porch. The sound of the prison van's doors slamming echoed like a punctuation mark to a chapter I never wanted to read again. Mrs. Ellis came to sit with me. We sat in silence for a long time, the autumn wind rattling the branches overhead. Later, Jonathan came by with an update. "Daniel's filing appeals, but the charges are strong. He'll be there for a long time." I nodded. "Good." My voice wasn't bitter, it was tired, resolute. Weeks later, a letter arrived. The envelope was plain, but Daniel's handwriting was unmistakable. My hand froze when I saw it. My heart pounded, not with fear, but with a strange curiosity. Jonathan glanced at me when I showed him. "Do you want to open it?" I shook my head. "No." That night, I placed it on my dresser without opening it. I didn't want to know what he would say. Forgiveness was not mine to give, not for the way he tried to erase me. I think about that letter sometimes. What if he had written the truth? What if there was regret? But I've learned something in these months. Some wounds can't be healed by words alone. Some betrayals, no matter how deep, cannot survive the truth. I sit by my window in the evenings now, watching the world outside. My life has changed forever, but so has my sense of who I am. I am not the frightened woman who once silenced herself. I am Margaret Harris, and I have reclaimed my voice. One afternoon, Mrs. Ellis came by with a small bouquet of chrysanthemums, my favorite. "For your strength," she said softly. I took them, the petals brushing against my palm, and smiled. I thought family meant blood. But now I know family is anyone who stands by you when the world tries to silence you. Her eyes glistened. "You're right. I thought a lot about what to say now. How to close this chapter. And I realized my story isn't just about betrayal. It's about courage. About finding your voice when the world tells you to be quiet. If you take one thing away from my story, let it be this: love without respect is just control. And betrayal, no matter how deep, cannot survive the truth." Before I end this story, I have to ask you something. What would you do in my place? Would you stand up and fight? Or would you let fear silence you? I want to hear your thoughts. Share your story in the comments. And if this story moved you, if it gave you strength or hope, please like this video and subscribe for more real-life stories that matter. Thank you for walking with me through this journey. From the bottom of my heart, I will never stop speaking my truth. Goodbye, and stay brave.